Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler, and today is Before the Mast, Life and Death Aboard the Mary Rose. It is just a fantastically interesting book. So the Mary Rose was Henry VIII's flagship, sank in July 1545. It sailed out of Portsmouth. Now what makes it really interesting is it was pulled up in 1982, I think. But the conditions of the Solent where it went down was very silty, and it kept a lot of the microbes and the animals away that would otherwise make all the organics disappear. So steelwork, ironwork has almost completely rusted away. There's almost none of it. But organic stuff, wood, horn, bone, leather, really well preserved. And because the ship actually went down in fairly shallow water, it's not like a deep sea wreck where things can get a chance to break up and fall apart. The elements of the boat stayed quite close together. It stayed largely whole, and it fell, it landed on the silt at the bottom, settled in, got covered over, and it just means that it's like a time capsule of July 1545. So the individual rooms on the ship are identifiable. You know where the kitchen is, the physician's cabin, the captain's cabin, the crew quarters, the powder store, and so on. But also what that means is that the objects had stayed in place in those rooms. So you end up with seeing not just one or two objects that belonged to the surgeon, but basically everything that belonged to the ship's surgeon, everything that belonged in the galley, in place in a specific dated moment, and a lot of it in incredibly good condition. So if you've seen any of the footage of things like chests of arrows or longbows that are coming up to the surface, the longbows were still in good enough condition that they tried to draw them. Not with success, it must be said, but they weren't full of holes, they weren't full of worm damage and so on. They were complete and virginal almost in the look of them. They were brilliant. And an awful lot of the artefacts on the Mary Rose are like that. So it is just an absolute time capsule to that date. There's a fantastic museum down in Portsmouth where you can walk around sort of almost room by room through the ship and see exactly what's there. Thoroughly recommend it. So in my mind, there's effectively 3 volumes to this. There's the first part, which is Before the Mast, and that deals with the domestic side of life, the day-to-day life on the Mary Rose. And then there's another double volume called Weapons of War, which rather obviously covers all the weapons of war. We're going to cover that book at a later date. So we're just looking at Before the Mast now. So I very rudely opened this up and I'm just going to read the contents because there's too much for me to really talk about and remember. But we've got Life on the Mary Rose here. So it talks about the ship itself. Then we talk about the clothing. So silk hats to woolly socks, personal possessions, purses to paternosters. One of the things also that I love is a very Renaissance thing were ear scoops. So these tiny little spoons for digging around in your ear. I don't recommend it, obviously. For digging around in your ear and scooping out your earwax. More ear scoops were recovered off the Mary Rose than there was crew on it, which I think is just a fantastic little thing. Fishing equipment, knives and knife sheaths. The knife sheaths I've looked at obviously closely given my trade, but what's interesting about those is they have all the hallmarks of trench art or scrimshaw. They're people who are trying to kill time. So you've got incredibly ornately carved knife sheaths, way beyond any purpose other than somebody's just decided to fill up 30 hours of their life carving something. Then it goes on to the surgeon's equipment, illness and so on. Musical instruments, because again, Renaissance life was full of colour. Don't get mistaken by the films. Full of colour and full of joy and dancing, as well as death and pestilence and Spanish pox that it lists. So there's an awful lot of musical instruments, awful lot of religion, so you have a lot of artefacts with that. And then cleaning equipment, cooking equipment, and then the crew themselves. So actually looking at the skeletal remains. Brilliant, just brilliant. So I'll show you a couple of pages here. Oh, that one just happens to be shoes that I've opened up. Very fashionably Tudor square end shoes there, you can see. Just another random page. Oh, lovely. So carpenter's equipment, sewing thimbles, sailmaker's gear, I suppose, probably. That sort of thing. Another random, some leather buckets as well. musical instrument stuff. There you go, sort of little flutes, can't remember what their actual name is there. And it's not just a... Oh well. It's not just an interesting book. It is a scientific analysis. Wherever they can, they look at, as well as the dimensions, fantastic archaeological drawings, which I never really worked out why, but they always show more than photographs. So you get incredible detail with those, but then it talks about the chemical composition of things, the likely ages of things, the materials that they're made of, the dimensions of those materials. Just a brilliant reference for day-to-day life in July 1545. And I'm guessing that July is also, in some levels, going to be quite important as well, because people are going to be at... Go on! But again, the clothing and the artefacts that people are going to be different in the summer. So not only was it a fantastic time capsule of that year, it's a time capsule of a particular day. So for the right person, this is a fantastically useful book. It is a time capsule from one day, one date, with all of the artefacts from then. Is it enormously useful to me as a cutler? No, not particularly. There's some stuff in there, but it is, of course, just a very, very interesting book, fascinating book. And it talks about techniques and materials in a way that is useful and does transfer to my craft. It's a great book. So if it's your sort of thing, I absolutely recommend it. It's not cheap. They've never been cheap. They've got quite a price tag, but my goodness, do you get a book for your money? And there's details in the notes at the end of the film. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again.